Well, hello there. It's Teresa Norton here, and you're listening to The View from Abroad. And I'm the Broad, and this is the podcast where we unpack a column that I wrote and ran in the South China Morning Post, Hong Kong's sort of Asia's actually kind of premier newspaper, every Saturday from 1993 to 2000. And each week I invite a guest to choose a column, and then we kind of unpack it together to see what still feels relevant, how our opinions may have changed over time. And in the second half, that person shares a true story from their own life. So today's guest is Chris Kyme. He's a very good friend and advertising creative director. He has directed me in a number of commercial voiceovers over the years. He's been in Hong Kong and Asia for over 30 years, so he'll be joining us shortly. But before we get to him, let's listen to that column that he chose. Ghost of a chance to go green. I don't know. Maybe I'm nuts, or maybe I'm just getting skeptical in my old age. But when I read the headline, Tong's $30 billion Green Crusade, my first thought was, that's one expensive public relations campaign. I'm sorry, but adding 300 smoky vehicle spotters and increasing the on-the-spot fine to 1,000 Hong Kong dollars is not nearly a strong enough approach to the problem of smoky vehicles. There is nothing concrete proposed to discourage idling vehicles, and giving grants to taxi, bus, and truck owners to subsidize emission testing and the installation of catalytic converters is not going to get them tested and installed, because the taxi owners are not interested in paying a penny out of their own pockets to cover the rest of the cost. Our tax dollars must go to pay for 100% of the cost, or the fines for being caught unconverted must be so stiff that it's worth paying their share. I'm afraid this communal conscience, which I assume is what he means by a fundamental change of mindset, is not something we Hong Kongers are inclined to do. You gotta pay us to do something, or fine us if we don't. Grease us or fleece us, or scare the poop out of us. We haven't actually tried that one yet. Rather than the inevitable public relations blitz with accompanying cheering billboards and catchy jingles celebrating the new clean green model SAR, I think we should just freak the public into a fundamental change of mindset. The scene, a noisy, congested intersection in, say, Mongkok. A young mother stands with her infant in her arms, waiting for the light to change. Curbside, a white van sits, engine idling, and thick black smoke pouring from the exhaust. As the smoke from the vehicle tailpipe begins to morph into the shape of a ghost, the traffic noise drops out, and the camera cuts to the woman and the child and the sound of their breathing as they unknowingly inhale the ghost. Traffic noise up, and we see a wide shot of the intersection. Mother and child cross the street in a crush of pedestrians, while camera pulls back to reveal more and more ghosts forming from exhaust fumes. My working title is The Ghost in the Machine. There you go. New campaign done. All creativity supplied free of charge. And I'm sure Sting and the other members of the police would give their blessing to our nicking their album title as a catchphrase for the campaign. But let's be honest with ourselves. Although it is imperative that we do what we can here in Hong Kong, the real source of our air pollution lies to the north. I'm no rocket scientist, but I go to Shenzhen, and this high-tech industry model is so polluted that even after a day indoors, I feel like I've been poisoned. The only real solution to our pollution problem is the commitment to the mainland to clean up its model industrial cities. I don't know anything about Food and Environmental Hygiene Bureau Chief Lily Yam, who will represent our interests in meetings with Guangdong's environmental department, but I can only hope that she is as sincere in her commitment to Hong Kong survival as legislative councillors Christine Loh and Bernard Chan have proven to be. As my friend Rob pointed out, the green bandwagon is a popular one for legislators to jump on these days. We need to recognize the true visionaries and not be fooled by the vote-getting gobbledygook. If a sort of joint declaration of war on pollution could be made, what better example to the world of the mainland's commitment to the people of Hong Kong? We emphasize the two systems, but a pledge to make Hong Kong a model city, one where environmental mistakes were made in the past but made right in the millennium, would demonstrate the best of one country. We could be saved from the ghost in the machine. The PRC is learning the value of good PR, and making Hong Kong a cleaner, safer place has no downside. The motherland breathing life into Hong Kong. Now, that's a PR campaign worth every penny of that $30 billion, Mr. Tung. Well, hello, Chris. It's so nice to have you with us.
Hi, Teresa. Yeah, nice to be here.
You know, I was grazing back through emails that you and I had shared over the years. One of the commercials that I came upon was one, I think you sent me this for AmeriQuest, which was a mortgage company. And they had a series of commercials where there was a very innocent situation that got misjudged or misinterpreted. And their tagline was, "Don't judge too quickly, we won't." And they
I don't think I sent you that, but that sounds like fun. Yeah.
Well, it was just a great example of clever advertising. And while this column that we've chosen wasn't for a commercial advertising campaign, you know, well, when you look back on it, what still rings true for you, and what about what I had to say feels a bit dated?
There's a couple of things there. One is the topic of the government information, publicity campaigns, which still go on today. And you were talking about that. And I think the sort of challenges that you outlined, how do you change people's behavior through those campaigns, is still very prevalent today, actually, even more so, I would say.
I remember when I first came to Hong Kong, they called them GIS commercials, right? Government Information Service commercials. And one of them showed this guy in like a, what we call, it's an inappropriate term, but a wife beater, one of those sleeveless T-shirts, drinking a beer, and he's watching TV. And then they cut to a mother and a daughter, the kid's riding a bicycle down below in the playground, and the guy's sipping his beer, and they go back and forth and back and forth. And then he tosses the beer out of the window, the empty beer bottle out the window. And you see it, spinning in slow motion and getting closer and closer to the mother and the kid. And the last shot is they cut up to, he's sitting watching TV, and they pan back and you see a picture of him with his family, and it's the wife and that kid. So the message was not just don't throw a beer bottle out the window, you may kill somebody, but the person you kill may be your very own wife and child. So that was a bit of a scare the poop out of them, campaign in order to change behavior.
And I found what was interesting to me with what you wrote was, so you described this idea, and there was a mother and a baby, and it's all about pollution. And then the kind of ghost light thing comes out of the exhaust. Now, I have to say that when we were going through the process of doing those kind of commercials, that's exactly what we were looking for, because you'd be in a room, you brainstorm, and you go, there's an idea. And, as a creative director, when people are sort of chit-chatting about, you spot that and you go, hang on, that's an idea, right? So I could imagine, although I think you're a bit ambitious wanting to get the police involved, on those kind of budgets. But I can imagine that kind of visual of smoke turning into some sort of a ghoul would be quite a strong idea within a 30-second commercial. So if I'd been the creative director, I would have said, okay, hold that thought. And
wow.
you would have developed it as a kind of a 30-second script, because it would also translate into posters. So once you've got a visual, sort of icon like that, it works across all media. But that image of the smoke, I was listening to a podcast the other day about ghosts, and somebody was describing a ghostly experience somewhere in the UK. And they said that they saw this mist in the shape of a woman. Okay, that's how they described the ghost.
Yeah.
So, that's quite relevant, that the ghost is kind of seen as shapes like that.
And also, I mean, ghosts in Chinese culture played a very big part in a lot of horror movies and things like that. In fact, I did a podcast about Halloween recently, and that there was no Halloween celebration in Hong Kong when I first got there because that was such a taboo subject, right? So the idea of a ghost coming into a child, I wonder if the brakes might have been put on it because it would have just been culturally too disturbing. I mean, do you have any thoughts about
Um,
that?
yeah, I've seen some things get rejected because people are a bit of afraid of it. But in my experience, when it's messaging with a purpose for a good cause, you can get away with a bit more. People will
Mm,
accept a bit more. So if you look at a lot of charity advertising, sometimes it's a bit risque, it's a bit scary, whatever.
mm.
But because it's for a good cause, people find it more acceptable than if it's a fashion brand or something like that.
Right. It's not just shock
That's
value for
right.
the sake of shock.
Yeah, so your column, I think, within there, you wrote up the description of cut to this and cut to that, which was very professional. I mean, that's how I write scripts. You write a 30-second script. I can write exactly within 30 seconds. And that's how it reads like that. So I would have hired you on the spot.
You see the smile on my face. I am so chuffed that maybe I missed my calling. Maybe I should have been a writer for an advertising
Well, the
agency.
thing is, I mean, we always look for the simple idea, right? You've got to know, we always say, what's the idea? And I think that's what's missing with so much advertising today, not just in Hong Kong, but in other countries. And if people talk about the fact that technology's taken over and everything's been data driven and that ideas, someone said to me, ideas don't matter. But no, sorry, to me, whenever I see something good, even an online film that's really good, there's an idea behind it.
Mm,
So
mm, mm,
ideas
mm.
are important. And if you look at what we see today with the government GIS campaigns, it's always lacking strategy. And I have a presentation about this that I give to sometimes to NGOs or whatever, is how to influence public behavior through a strategy and a
Right.
campaign.
Well, that goes back to that whole thing about grease us or fleece us, or I suggested, or scare the poop out of us. But the fleece
Yes.
us idea, which did seem to take on in Hong Kong, was the shopping bags, right? I mean, I don't know how many people were actually buying those reusable shopping bags in Hong Kong because they were concerned about environment, and
Nah,
how much
it's
of it was
money.
just, I'm not paying 50 Hong Kong
Money.
cents for a
To
bag.
money talks in Hong Kong. Once they
Yeah.
put a price on it, everyone started going, "Oh, okay." I look at it differently. I don't think it was anything to do with being environmentally aware.
Now, is that not a strategy? Does
Yep,
that, yeah,
totally.
that's an idea. I also want to go on to the thing about, I talk a lot about pollution and pollution in Hong Kong, and that being related to the development in the, excuse me, in the Pearl Delta region. Is there much discussion about that anymore?
No, I don't see a lot about it, and but also I get the feeling that it's less so today.
Yeah,
We used to have really dirty water in the sea, but I noticed that's a lot cleaner nowadays. And it might be partly because of that. I mean, you talked about Shenzhen, right? Going to Shenzhen then is very
then,
different than going there now. I
yeah,
was there recently. It's absolutely stunning. It's so huge for a start, and it's shimmering. It's kind of modern life. About two generations have grown up, enjoying that kind of good living. And I
yeah.
think that China has been doing its part to try and clamp down on pollution. I do think so. I mean,
And that was part of the point of that column too. It was saying
yes,
we need to buddy up on this.
yeah.
We need to partner up and be, partners in making sure that our people are safe to breathe and drink the water. And
So I think there has been progress.
so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Another thing I was going to ask you about is, this was written right after the handover and right after Tung Chi-hua had been made our very first chief executive. And I thought it was a bit bullshhy of me to be, kind of giving him advice on what he should do with his campaign.
When I read that and I looked through it, your column was written in a very witty way. and it was cheerful and it cheered everyone up. And it was kind of like, at that time, something you look forward to every week. It was like, oh, here's Teresa. And it was fun to read. And I think that the way that came across was it wasn't like you were admonishing. You weren't trying to be over opinionated. It was just like, well, here's a thought. Maybe we should be doing this. Maybe I'm nuts, but we should be doing this. And I think I think even today it would be taken in the same light, to be honest. I think it would,
Yeah.
because of the way that you wrote, you
Yeah.
know.
I still am involved in a love affair with Hong Kong, right? 40 years of my life there. Of course, this place is very, very special to me.
But
And
there are still many people like that, like you, still
yeah,
here.
yeah, I know. Well, you're one of them, right? Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, let's do this. Let's take a little bit of a break here because in the second half, I want to hear the true story from you that was unearthed by that column. And I also want to have a little chat with you about a certain book that you've got up your sleeve. All right, Chris, what is the name of the book that you wrote about advertising in Hong Kong in the 80s and 90s?
So yeah, it's entitled "Made in Hong Kong," and it's about what I would say was the emergence of creativity in advertising. That sort of got its speed in the sort of 70s and right through the 80s and 90s. I think some of the best advertising ever created in Hong Kong was done during that time. So it's about the pioneers, it's about the people that laid down the foundations, paved the way, and also a young generation of local creatives. Because when I arrived, it was a lot of expats in the top jobs and everything. This
That's
young
right.
local generation rose up and they started what they'd learned about ideas, about strategy, about objectives. They applied all of this to their own culture. And there was just some of the most amazing, wonderful local style work that came from that time. So the book is about that. And I interviewed, I did it with my friend Tommy Jeng, who's now living in the UK. Tommy and I interviewed lots of people about what it was like. How did you go through this? What were the dynamics at the time, etc. So that's what the book's about.
I remember I arrived in 83 with, my voiceover tape. And I was advised to send it to production companies or agencies. I said, no, I want to sit down with the creative directors. And I made appointments to sit down with Stony Mudd and, all those guys who were the creative directors. And you're right, it was almost exclusively expatriates at that time. But the kinds of commercials that were being produced for XO cognac and Maha soap were fabulous, and a lot of humor too.
Yeah, and I think that it was a lot of it was influenced by US and American and British style advertising, but it also had its own unique Hong Kong flavor often. If you remember the FOV, taller than the rest,
Yes.
taller than the rest, that long bottle. And it was always someone getting one up on someone else. And the stories there was one that was about chopsticks, and so they always had a uniquely Hong Kong kind of flavor to them. So it was its own unique style of advertising, and
Absolutely.
became even more so. Once the local kids started learning and then getting their own ideas. And in the book, which started out as a presentation that I gave at Cannes, my observation was they're doing ideas that I couldn't do because their local insights are so kind of like unique to
Specific.
them, their own life experiences, and that's where it got really brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So, title of the book again, and where can we get it?
Made in Hong Kong, and it was on sale in Hong Kong, but I think it's eventually sold out. And the publisher is called We Press in Hong Kong, capital WE Press, and it's on their website. You can still buy it on their website.
Wonderful. Thank you for
Mm.
sharing. And now I want to hear the other story. You chose a column, and I'm always interested to hear what came to the surface as it result of listening to that or reading it that applies to your own life?
Well, apart from the topic of environmental care, which is very relevant today, and I'm still working on concepts for NGOs. I mean, I work with NGOs all the time on different causes. Apart from that, was when you described your idea, and what came to my mind was sometimes we would be brainstorming for things on a brief. You come up with ideas, and you go, "That's great," and you get really excited about it because you want more than anything to get it executed and make it really good, because that's what we get up for every day. We don't get up to write boring, insurance brochures or kind of boring kind of bank ads. We want to do something good. That's what gets us out of bed as creative people. When I first arrived here, I was working in an agency called Leo Burnett, and they had dairy farm milk. And the creative team had been working on a brief, which was the directive from the top was we want people talking about our milk. We want an ad with people talking about our milk, right? Which is pretty boring, right? And I sort of was kind of looking in through the door, and the creative team were pretty frustrated by this. And I came up with another angle for it. And I said, why don't we get kids to talk about the milk? And there was a TV show in the UK around in the 80s called, I think it was called Child's Talk or something, Child's Play or something like that. And they gave children a word. And then they said, right, talk about this word without saying the word. And what children say, like 7, 8, 9 years old, what they say is hilarious because their imaginations are so amazing.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, why don't we
and they're
say
not
the word?
and they're not self-conscious. They're not trying to be clever, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're just saying what they believe. They might say, how come the tide goes down? Well, maybe someone pulled the plug out, and that's what they honestly believe. So I said, why don't we translate this into children and give them the word, which is milk, delicious milk, the milk they love, and let's have them talking about it. So we sold that idea in at maybe mid-client level, and then it was approved, and we went off to shoot it. If you remember the director,
Oh, yeah.
Stash Radwanski, who was one of the top directors at the time. And
Yeah.
we got in the studio with a bunch of kids, and myself and my Chinese copywriter partner colleague. We did it in English, we did it in Cantonese, and we proceeded to interview kids about milk. And I remember the camera was inside a box. We didn't want them to see the camera or be intimidated by the camera, so we sat just kind of in front of the camera. And we just kept saying, well, how would you describe it? And then the little girl was going, yeah, you do this and you do it and it comes out, and they were kind of, and it's really, really creamy. And it's kind of, and we captured all this amazing stuff that was natural, none of it scripted. We spent about 2 weeks in editing house, then editing two commercials in English, two in Chinese to perfection. I mean, we'd sit there 11 o'clock at night going, let's just get that clip, there's, and I loved it. And I thought, this is my arrival in Hong Kong. I hadn't been there that long, but I'm already doing something I think's good. Anyway, finally polished them up, took them to the sort of chairman or whatever, and they got rejected. And after all that work, and they were beautiful. I still got them somewhere, one of those big old tapes. And they were beautiful. And it would have been so different in Hong Kong at that time. Yeah. And got rejected because he really wanted to have adults talking about their brand and their milk.
Right.
He wanted what he directed. He didn't want something. And unfortunately, the concept was sold in slightly below his level. And I was gutted. I mean, it was absolutely destroyed.
I was just going to say, how did you feel? Oh,
yeah. I mean, I just felt when that happens, because you love the work that you do and you love the ideas. Yeah. And, I had, since then, I'd had quite a few successes and whatever, and things that did go through.
Sure.
But I always remember the ones that are really good that got rejected, and you just feel so bad.
Never saw the light of day. Yeah. I'm just thinking, there are people who are writing novels that never really take off. They don't really, they can't get them published. They can't get an agent to pick them up, and they can't get they're never going to be the bestseller. But the good thing today is in terms of personal creativity, I mean, this podcast is a good example. You can just do it yourself and get it out there. But in advertising, if it's not bought by the client, it ends up in a box, in a filing cabinet, on a tape that sits in your home, right?
Yeah, I keep a bottom drawer of ideas, and some of the best ideas ever are sitting in that bottom drawer. And look, creativity is subjective. Sometimes it's I like, I don't like. And when we're working on an advertising brief has a very strong criteria, right? It has like background, target audience, competitive frame, who are we talking to? What do they think? What do we want them to think? What can we say to them that's going to make them think that? And then what's the support for that? That's kind of a standard brief. And the idea of that is it narrows it down. And once you get a client to sign off on that and say, yes, that's the one thing we're going to say, then all you got to do is come up with ideas that they either like or they don't like.
Mm.
And that's what, so you try to come up with a range that you think are good. It's still hard. Even then, it's really hard because
Yeah.
sometimes they change the brief. There's all kinds of things that can kill an idea on the way to the final round. Sometimes things get rejected for really good sound reasons, and you listen to it and you go, okay, yeah, absolutely, see your point, really. And but often or not, it's subjective personal taste, and that's where it's difficult. So one of the other things I'm focusing on, with a bit more time on my hands nowadays, is training, because I look at the advertising and how bad it is, and I think that concepts are what's missing. And so I've tried to design a series of training presentations to help young people in the industry and clients how to nourish and nurture creativity, and for clients get better ROI, because the more creative the work, the more outstanding, the chances are it's going to kind of hit more people. And that's what I've been trying to focus on.
Here's an idea for you. Now, here we are. We're coming to the end of our little episode, but I always have this commercial break, and I've been toying around ever since I put the break in the middle. And maybe I should, start creating, in collaboration with somebody, some little mini goof ads to put in the center there.
Well, or could you open up that space for some real ads and offer the creative writing services to go along with the package?
Well, what an idea.
I started out writing radio commercials. I love radio, and I know that you do too, because
Yeah.
you've come
I'm an
from
old
that
radio
background.
broad. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I learned my chops was writing 30-second radio ads. You could offer that service to people that will create your ad, and it's going to go here in the middle. And if you've got you've got the voice, you can record it. You can have a lot of fun with radio.
Well, listen, on that rather, inspiring note, let me say thank you for joining today, Chris. I mean, it's been a fun conversation. I feel really enormously flattered that you looked at that column and saw such potential in me, when I kind of thought it was just maybe a little over the top and kind of goofy, but maybe over the top and goofy is, my
Teresa, you never know. Now that it's out, you might see that turn up somewhere. Keep your eyes peeled.
Okay, everybody, listen, breathe all the time, come up slowly. And, if you have just pitched something to your boss or your colleagues, or there's a big idea that you're trying to get off the ground and you're worried that it's not going to be accepted, what if it's good? What if everything turns out okay? If you've enjoyed the podcast, please like, share with your friends, comment, and we'll see you next time.